In the first part of my Mass Effect 2 review, I talked about how its gunplay has improved from the original. Just the improved gunplay alone would make Mass Effect 2 a great game and a worthy sequel. But that's only part of what makes Mass Effect 2 so magical. What truly gives Mass Effect 2 that magical quality is that the game makes you feel like you're starring in your own sci-fi action movie. And a lot of that has to do with the gunplay, of course, but a lot of great shooters feature great gunplay without actually making you feel like you're a big action star starring in your own action movie. Of course, this isn't the first game that tried to get this feel across to its players. Many have tried, and some have succeeded to varying degrees, the original Mass Effect being one of them. Probably the two most successful since then have been Uncharted 2 Among Thieves and Dragon Age Origins. But none have come even close to Mass Effect 2. So where did Mass Effect succeed where others have failed? The biggest way Mass Effect 2 separates itself from Uncharted 2 Among Thieves is that you make decisions in the game that impact the outcome of a game. One of the biggest reasons why Uncharted 2, despite its superb, unmatched cinematic quality, doesn't make players feel like you're starring in your own action movie is because you don't make any choices that impact the game. Instead, you listen to dialogues to which you have no input and watch tons of cutscenes, many of them flashbacks, that only further impress on you that you're watching a movie rather than starring in one. You never get the sense that you're Nathan Drake. In Mass Effect 2, you really feel like you're Shepard and that you're tasked to explore this world and make important decisions and interact with characters in a way that will accomplish your objective. Even cutscenes mainly consist of showing aftermaths of completed missions as opposed to flashbacks. Using flashbacks helps flesh out the story and brings a greater sense of relevance to the plot, and certainly Uncharted 2's flashbacks greatly add to its cinematic quality, but they also serve to distance you from your character, as in you're not that character, you're just an observer who gets to control him during action sequences, because flashbacks tend to make the timeline non-linear. The non-linearity of a timeline gives you that sense that nothing you're seeing is happening in real time. Ironically, the game allows you to tackle missions only in sequential order as predetermined by the game, meaning that you don't control the timeline at all. You don't control which missions to tackle first. You're entirely bound to a timeline as determined by the developers, even if that timeline is non-linear. In Mass Effect 2, you get the sense that you control the timeline, that you decide which missions to tackle first, which missions to ignore, which characters to interact with, which love story to pursue. Of course, none of this is new. Mass Effect did this as well, and it did it pretty well. But there are numerous differences between Mass Effect and Mass Effect 2. In Mass Effect, I didn't quite get that sense that I'm Shepard and that I make decisions which determine the outcome. I never got the sense that I'm starring in my own sci-fi action movie. For one thing, the writing in Mass Effect 2 is much tighter than it was in Mass Effect. Take the villain in Mass Effect for instance. Saren is this alien dude who is just evil, with a capital E. He's a very one-dimensional character, basically a bigot with a score to settle. I guess it's just a byproduct of being exposed to so many Hollywood movies. You have to have a villain who's extremely dislikable and disagreeable. The villain must not be a well-rounded character. It just feels too formulaic. In fact, the entire game feels formulaic, artificial even, and I always had that sense that I'm being manipulated and stringed on through this Hollywood plot. Take the writing and the dialogues. There were just too many black and white responses. Your character is often forced to respond to a situation by being a care bear or a complete jerk. None of the responses felt right for my character. Even if I chose to create a heartless, ruthless character, would she say these things in these situations? I could never shake that feeling that I'm playing a game coded specifically so that dialogue option A means good, dialogue option B means neutral, and dialogue option C means evil. The dialogues just didn't feel natural. It's not all that different in Mass Effect 2. Most dialogue options are good, neutral, or evil, but for one thing, they're just better written so that what Shepard ends up saying doesn't sound overtly good or evil, or better put, goody two-showish or bitchy. And secondly, the choices you make within the dialogues aren't always inherently good or evil. Sometimes you're presented with three choices, and it's not clear which response is good, neutral, and evil. They're just different. And best of all, the choices are oftentimes dependent on effectiveness. At times, it's just more effective to remain neutral. Sometimes it serves your purpose better to be a hard-ass. Sometimes it helps to soften up a little and provide a much-needed comforting touch. In real life, you can't go around bitching at everyone, even if you feel like doing so. For the sake of accomplishing your objective, or just because it seems more appropriate, you have to forsake your own feelings at times and give a lending hand or say something kinder than you would normally. And Mass Effect 2 presents you with situations in which you feel like your objective would be better reached if you go against character, and thus you do. That lack of artificial clear-cut line between good and evil, and the inclusion of objective-based dialogue choices instead of just giving you the option of saying something mean or saying something kind, do a lot to make the world seem somehow more natural. It feels like a fully realized world instead of one conjured up by the developers to provide you with choices to make. In Mass Effect 2, I never got that feeling of, oh, I see what they're going for there. And as a result, being pulled out of a moment, I was just immersed in the story, and all the choices, whether in dialogue or action, felt seamlessly integrated into the story. Another great thing about the dialogue is that bioware gives you the option of interrupting someone to perform some type of action. They divide into good actions and evil actions, the good actions being the likes of hugging someone or stopping someone from killing a character, and the evil actions being the likes of punching someone. Now, I don't think this system is fully realized because all these actions seem effective, meaning I've never performed a good or evil action and have it backfire on me. In fact, it's my belief that they only become available to you if your character's Paragon or Renegade meter is high enough, so that the success rate of achieving the outcome you desired in taking the action is 100%. It would have been wonderful if I, for example, decided to hit a character to try to intimidate him and get him to reveal who he's working for, only to find that hitting him was the worst thing I could possibly have done because he's a type that cowers in fear and completely closes up when faced with physical abuse. So it's not a perfect system, but the inclusion of it is most welcome and adds to that sense that you're not locked into the dialogue mode. One of the biggest problems with dialogues in games is that there's a sense of separation between dialogue mode and action mode. If you engage a character in dialogue, you're basically stuck there and you have to see the dialogue through. It doesn't help that most dialogues in games are there merely to provide information to the players. Mass Effect 2 isn't all that different from other games, but this inclusion of being able to break from dialogue and take actions while in dialogue mode helps fuse that separation between dialogue mode and action mode. At least it gives off the illusion that you don't just have to talk and listen to dialogue endlessly to gain information. You get the sense that you're actually involved in the dialogue and you can take actions to try and steer the dialogue in a desired direction. It's not much, and it's certainly not fully realized, but it's an interesting change to the conventional Ask 20 Questions approach to dialogue taken by developers in the past, and I for one am excited to see what BioWare does with it in the future. A lot of games are touted for allowing choices you make throughout the game impact the game world, and especially how the ending plays out. In terms of choices impacting the game world, the first and most noteworthy to do this is Fallout. A more recent example would be The Witcher. Let's say you decide to make a porn video. Okay, that's Fallout 2, but it's just too delicious of an example not to use. Well, be prepared for everyone in town to yank out their dicks and jizz at your direction whenever you walk by. Okay, that doesn't actually happen in the game, but they do comment on your performance. And Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is famous for having 6 or so different endings depending on who you side with in-game. Mass Effect 2 trumps them all. BioWare started going in this direction with Mass Effect, and they took it 4 or 5 big gravity moon steps further with Dragon Age Origins, but they've perfected it in Mass Effect 2. Okay, perhaps perfected isn't the right word because I can think of several ways BioWare could improve on what they've accomplished with Mass Effect 2. Regardless, the choices you make throughout the game will absolutely and definitively impact how the game plays out, especially how the game ends. Simply put, the game will play out differently depending on the choices you make in-game. And it all culminates in the final mission in which you're tasked to destroy something. If you've made poor choices throughout the game, your final mission is going to be a rough ride. And by poor choices, I don't mean wrong choices, because how you finish the final mission doesn't matter at all, as long as you finish it, because there is no right or wrong ending to a game. There are simply numerous endings available, and the ending you end up with is simply your particular story unfolding in that way. Your character could even end up dead and it wouldn't matter. That's the crux of my argument I'm making. There is no right or wrong ending. Your ending isn't determined simply by choosing from options A to Z, where A will lead to this ending and B will lead to that ending, and so forth. No, the ending is determined by a combination of choices you make throughout the game. The story, at least in this sense, is not linear at all. Your story will curve this way and that way depending on choices you make at multiple junctures of a game. This completely adds to that feeling I mentioned earlier, that feeling that Mass Effect gets across more effectively than any other game. You are Shepard, and you are faced with a situation, and you determine how the story unfolds. You are an action star starring in your own damn sci-fi movie. I mean, ever wonder what it would be like to be Ripley and take care of that little girl and fight all those aliens and yell at Bill Paxton to shut up as he incessantly whines? Mass Effect 2 is the realization of what BioWare started with Mass Effect and continued to refine in Dragon Age Origins. The game features, quite simply, the best third-person shooting and some wonderful writing and an open-endedness to its story, and it gives you a taste of what it would be like if you were a hot lesbian assassin. Oh wait, that's just specific to me, but you get what I'm saying. I for one cannot wait to see how my Shepard story ends in Mass Effect 3.